All right, well, we'll turn on these microphones now and ask these guys a few questions for the next few minutes, and I'm going to turn it over to you guys as well. Coach Pruitt, let's first start with you and talk about this transition that you've made from being the defensive coordinator of the national champions to the head coach at the University of Tennessee. I would imagine that's a huge undertaking. What have you drawn on in your past as a high school coach and then as a college coach that has helped you through these last few months?
I'd say probably one thing is being an assistant coach. You want to be the best assistant coach that you can possibly be, and to do that, you want to alleviate some of the stress off the head football coach. So having an opportunity to work with some of the men that I've worked with, you kind of have a plan if you ever get an opportunity to do this one day. And I've been very fortunate in the fact that I've had Philip Fulmer, who was the head football coach for 16 years, won a national championship, done it at the highest level. And I know over his tenure at University of Tennessee, I know he has a plan for the things that he done, that he felt he had success, and probably some things that he would have done differently. So it's been a tremendous asset for me to be able to lean on him and be able to walk 30 yards down the hall to ask him a few questions if I need to.
When Nick Saban became the head coach at Alabama, you joined that program as well during that time. Was that similar or different in terms of that transition that was made at Alabama to the success they have now?
You know, I can see some similarities. I was on the first staff there in a very small role. So at the time, you know, just like we are right now, we're not where we want to be. And everybody that's associated with Tennessee has goals and aspirations of what we want Tennessee football to look like, and it's not looked exactly the way we want it to, and we've got a long ways to go to get there, but we've got everything that we need to get us going in the right direction.
Meanwhile, Coach Olgerson, at West Virginia this year, there are huge expectations as you have one of the best quarterbacks in the country returning in Will Grier from Davidson Day High School, by the way, just up the road. And again, the Big 12 is wide open. Oklahoma had a terrific season last year with Baker Mayfield and the Sooners. This season, are those your expectations as well from a season's goal standpoint? Is that something that you would address with your team?
Tell you know my administrators are right here, right?
Yes, right there.
So, yeah, right there. So you don't have to like get the expectations any higher than they already are. Jeez. My job's to kind of downplay this stuff a little bit. So in all seriousness, you know, everybody wants high expectations. I mean, I can assure you that the fan base at Tennessee is going to have high expectations as well. Everybody does. You know, that's college football. Everybody wants to be good. Everybody wants to be relevant. And West Virginia's fortunate to have some star power coming back. You know, it's set up just pretty cool for a guy like Will, you know, Grier, to be able to come to his hometown, to be able to play in front of his fans. You know, expectations-wise, I mean, who knows? College football is so incredibly competitive, and it's so incredibly, you know, just it's hard to win. Everybody's doing the same stuff, so it's hard to win. So we'll have a chance based on the guys that we got coming back. If we make good decisions with our play calls and he doesn't break his finger, it will probably help as well.
You know, you said one thing that I agree with when we were eating down there. You said, Taylor, with all due respect, the media doesn't know anything, and I would agree with that completely.
We were talking about recruiting. That was it. This guy's a genius now.
Having said that, it is the expectation of many that you'll be in the Big 12 championship game this year, so take that for whatever it's worth. I don't know if you heard that, but you know, a lot of people are fascinated, Coach, about West Virginia's inclusion in the Big 12, and you've been a part of that since the beginning. Yet you've also been very mindful that you've wanted to play some great non-conference competition in this region. You played Virginia Tech in the D.C. area last year. You have Tennessee to start the season. You're at NC State in Week 3. How important is that to also kind of create these games in this region for your fans?
Yeah, it's you know, it's kind of an afterthought now that we're in the Big 12, you know, going into our 7th year, I guess. You know, it was when I got the job, we were 1 year in the Big East. You know, and my background's always been the Big 12. I was there for 9-10 years prior to going first-time head coach, Big East. And then all of a sudden, a couple months later, bam, we're back in the Big 12. So it was weird for a while, and it was weird for our fan base because Being in the Northeast, it was easy to travel to games. I mean, you're going 3 hours or 1 hour or 4 hours, and you can get there pretty quick to be able to do that. You can't do that now. I mean, the travel does not affect us whatsoever because of airplanes, right? So it's easy, but it does affect the fan base. So we did try to do that. We wanted to get a lot of regional games that kind of continued to, have some of those old school rivals, so to speak.
Coach Pruitt, I know that you remember Will Greer from his days playing in the SEC East for the University of Florida a few years ago. The first game is 100 days away, but I imagine you've already taken a good look at what West Virginia has going into the season.
Well, after I watched our orange and white game, I said to myself, why do we need to work on any opponents? We probably need to keep just working on Tennessee. But I did watch probably a bunch of tapes here during the month of May, and he reminds me of a guy that played at Texas A&M, Johnny Manziel. I mean, he can extend. He's a great athlete. He's obviously a competitor, runs with toughness, can make all the throws, extends plays. So, yeah, and they do a fantastic job. He knows where the ball's going, pre-snap, gets all their RPO stuff, gets the ball out of his hand, but does a fantastic job. So, yeah, he's a great player.
You mentioned working on yourself and making sure you pay close attention to what you guys are going to establish as a program. What do you think is the most important thing you'd like to drill into your team as they go into your first season?
I think one of the big things is really becoming a team. This is when you come in and take over a program, for everybody, everything's new. So it doesn't matter how much experience you have. It's not exactly the way that you want it done. So everybody is learning the expectations, the standard, and in the process, there's going to be lots of growing pains. I'm sure there's probably be guys that's played a lot of ball that may not play anymore just because competition, or maybe they don't fit the system. But with that, the great thing about football is the best team don't win on Saturdays. It's the best team that plays for 60 minutes. So I think that's got to be a goal for us, is we got to become a team and we got to be able to play at our best.
What do you see, Coach, when you see the University of Tennessee? They always say when a new program is taking shape that it's hard to prepare for that. You look at film from when they were at other places. What are your thoughts about Tennessee in Game 1?
I got no idea, but we changed up all our stuff too, so they don't have any idea what we're gonna do. We worked on ourselves too in spring, and
you're gonna run the wishbone.
Wishbone option. We're getting rid of the 3 down front. Gonna kick it to more 4 down front stuff. Played a lot of zone cover 3 last year. We're gonna do mostly man coverage this year. So. There are 2 things. I mean, one, there's not a whole lot of secrets in college football. Everybody knows each other. We're going to do our due diligence, and we watch the orange and white game too, and we'll watch all the Alabama stuff, obviously, from coaches past. I mean, that's just what coaches do, and there's a lot of time between now and the first game to try to figure it out.
What are the biggest benefits you think for your team and for your program playing one of these games to start the season?
Oh, everybody's, we're talking about this at the table, everybody's excited about Game 1. I don't care who you play. They want to get to Game 1 and play Game 1. Because of, such a high-profile matchup with West Virginia and Tennessee, I mean, does that increase the work ethic in the summer and in camp? Probably, maybe a little bit. The big thing, I think, is for the fan base. I mean, these preseason neutral games are much like a bowl game, and Belk does a wonderful job with this bowl game here. Our fans have talked about it since I've been there, about how much fun that game was. And so for the fan bases to be able to treat it kind of like a bowl game, I think is spectacular. It's going to be great for the city of Charlotte. It's going to be great for WVU's exposure, for Tennessee's exposure. That's all well and good, but from a fan base perspective, I just think it's a special situation.
Yeah, you're so used to that too, Coach. You've been on staffs that have played in these types of atmospheres and games to start the season. What are the benefits from playing in a game like this?
Yeah, I think it gives you a really good idea of where you're at. You're sitting there, you're going against each other, and sometimes you get maybe one way or the other a little false sense of security, or maybe the other way. I think for us, having an opportunity to play West Virginia and what a good football team they're going to have, It'll tell us, for us, it's like playing a conference game, so we'll know exactly where we're at.
When you were a graduate, right after college, after you finished school and you were a graduate assistant and decided to go back and be a coach at the high school level, were your desires to one day do what you're doing now?
No, I think early on, you know, I've said this many times, is, you know, I played for my father, and he was the head coach in our hometown for 31 years, and the impact that him and my mom had on the people in our community was so visible to me at a young age. I saw how people looked and viewed at my father, and I felt like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a positive impact on young people, and that's where I kind of started. I was very fortunate that Nick Saban called me one night out of the blue, offered me a job, and kind of then my goals started changing.
Now that you're coaching, Dana, at a place like Morgantown, which for those that have not been there, is one of the best environments for a college football game, such a great, vibrant community for a college town, not just for football, but for all sports, especially basketball too. When you were going through the ranks, if you will, early in your 20s at places like Mississippi College, did you think that one day you would have the opportunity to do what you're doing now?
No, I wake up and pinch myself, you know, to just kind of understand kind of where I'm at. It's pretty special. You know, I've always loved the game of football. I said something to our players the other day. I said, and we did a leadership summit in Atlanta, and there's like 10 of them. And I said, look, guys, I said, how many of you guys love football? And of course they all raised their hand, love football. I go, how many of you guys are appreciative of the fact that you get your school paid for, and then we give you like $1,200 a monthly stipend or whatever it is. You guys, you know, so they don't have to work throughout the course of an entire year. That's 12 months and all that. And they all raised their hand and said, yeah, it's awesome. I go, how many of you guys would pay me $1,200 to play football? And they all go, wow, man, why would I pay you to play football? Well, like, because that's what I did. I was a slow 5'10", you know, kid growing up in Iowa. I wasn't a very good football player, but I loved the game of football. So I had to pay to play, you know, and so just always loved the game, you know, and worked our way up, much like Coach did, you know, from the smaller schools all the way up to where I'm fortunate to be now. But yeah, I pinch myself every morning.
Well, you're an inspiration to all slow 5'10" white people throughout this world, so thank you. Coach, let me ask you also about the ever-changing landscape of college sports. And there have been so much discussion on shows like the one that I do each morning on what's best for college football in terms of the playoff format and transfers, et cetera. Let's start with the playoff format, Dana. Do you think that what we're doing right now is the best format?
It appears to be working to me. I mean, you know, it'd probably be easier to ask him. He's been in those games before.
We'll go for it, Coach.
Kick it to him. Looks like it's working to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think with a playoff system, there's always going to be folks that they didn't like it the way it was done before. You're going to have somebody's always going to be the outside looking in. But I think if you look, probably since it started, you've probably had the best team has been the champion at the end. So I mean, yeah, I think it works.
How different is it now where you're trying to make sure all of your current players are happy as it once was? In other words, we're seeing so many players transfer if they're not happy with their playing time or for a myriad of reasons. How has that changed since you became involved in college football?
Well, I don't think that the guys on our staff or me in general, I'm not going to change how I coach. You know, when you recruit people, and you know, it's a little different now because we've inherited, you know, most of our team, and we didn't recruit them. So you're trying to build relationships, but at the end of the day, I think if you're providing what the student athlete needs when it comes to academic support, you're developing them as a player. Everybody's not always going to be happy, but I do think that the people, if you treat them the right way, most of them are going to stay where they're at. Now, I will say this. I was a transfer, so I played 2 years, so I got a little different look on it. I played 2 years at Middle Tennessee, was as happy as I could be. Thought that, you know, started, but I wanted an opportunity to kind of go play at a school that I'd always dreamed of playing at. and I did that, and I didn't play any, you know. So, but I did get a chance to do what I wanted to do, you know. So I look at it a little different.
That's interesting. And Dana, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing right now?
Well, I think we're at a crossroads with it, honestly. You know, and you know, the young man that we've been talking about, Will Greer, he was a transfer too, you know, and there's a reason to transfer, okay? But here's where I get, you know, and he paid his due. He sat out for a whole year, and you know, but what the NCAA is talking about now, you know, when you combine millennials and the NCAA, it's a disaster waiting to happen. and I worry about our sport, and I worry about our game if they grant kids immediate eligibility, because you're gonna make them mad at some point. They're not gonna be happy every single day, and it can't just be that easy to transfer. My thoughts on it are, you know, nobody forced those guys to sign the national letter of intent. They did that they made a decision to do that. So to me, the only way it works is if they get their degree. You know, I mean, they're student athletes. Is that not the goal? I mean, the goal for me, whenever we recruit kids, you know, we want them to be great players, but we want them to get their degree and be a functional person in our society. So to me, if you get your degree, if you get it in 3 years and you can go play somewhere else for 2 years, why not? I mean, I think those kids have that right. But you know, to grant guys immediately eligible, you know, based on just a one-time transfer, I think it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Jeremy, an interesting point, just to put a bow on this, is there is some movement right now that would have given you an extra year of eligibility based on graduation, that if you do transfer and you already have your degree in hand, that you could have 6 years to play 5. I've heard that mentioned. What are your thoughts on that?
They're gonna be beat up when they get done. No, I don't. You know, I don't think it's going to affect that many people really when you start looking at the rule itself. I actually looked at it the other day, how many guys would it have an effect on our team, and there was very few. So, you know, really, I've been worried about the things that I can control, and not worried as much about this type of stuff.
I'd like to talk to you guys about how much we love college football, and I think that one example of that is this game. Last year, the game was amazing between NC State and South Carolina, and Deebo Samuel is one of the most electrifying players we have seen in recent memory, and that game went down to the wire. But as I think about the end of that game, I think about the passion associated with college football, and when a game is on the line, it doesn't seem like there's anything that I can find in American sports that can replicate that. I'm sure you've had a similar experience, Jeremy.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. You know, when you look at it, how many things do we do out there that on a Saturday you get 100,000 folks that come and watch 22 men run into each other for 3 hours. I told Coach Fulmer this the other day. I can remember when I was growing up, I used to sit there on Sundays and watch everybody's coaches' shows. And it was all through the SEC. That's what we could see. And I told him I watched his, and he kind of looked at me. I said I was about 8 or 9 years old then. But yeah, it is. To me, I think it's the greatest game out there.
Yeah, when you have a game on the line, Coach Holgorsen goes from being 5'10" to 6'8" when his hair stands straight up. There's nothing better.
I'm hanging on, man. I'm hanging on.
How good a feeling that is, though, to be associated with college football in those moments?
Yeah, it's the most popular thing going, really. I mean, just with the amount of excitement, the amount of revenue, you can just go on and on. I mean, it's the most exciting thing out there. We're all blessed to be a part of it, and you know, this first game it'll be electric.
Well, we can't wait for this one. Tennessee and West Virginia, that first Saturday of the season. We'll only give you guys a few minutes to also ask some questions as well. If you have any for Coach Holgorsen or Coach Pruitt, you can just simply raise your hand and go for it. Andy.
I guess both of you would have some experience with this, but I don't know if you adopt a philosophy of trying to relate to the players from different backgrounds, different parts of the country and so forth individually to get them to sort of collectively buy in, or if you sort of adopt more
Both of you guys are recruiting nationally, so you have players from everywhere.
Yeah, I would think the big thing is nowadays when you go recruit a young man, it's usually he's wanting to know what can you do for him. You know, you start by academic support. Then they want to know how they're going to be developed as a player. I spoke to a group yesterday, and I'm looking on the wall, and there's all these NFL players on the wall. Basically, most of them, that's where they see themselves when they're 17 or 18 years old. So, you know, I think the big thing for anybody is, you know, they're wanting to know what you can do for them. I don't know, Dana, you might have a different idea on that.
Well, to me, it's all about the culture that exists where you're at, you know, and a lot of, you know, I'm sure Coach has said this, that, you know, we got to develop our own culture here. We got to get our culture in here. Well, our culture is pretty established after 8 years, you know, so, you know, so it just exists. How things are is it just exists. We got, we're a melting pot now. I mean, we got kids from maybe upwards of about 25 different states. I mean, so we go everywhere, you know, and so we got kids from every kind of different background that you can possibly imagine. You recruit them for a reason. You try to get to know them. You try to make sure that they're your kind of guy, and then you stick them in that locker room and you let the locker room take over. And if you got a culture that exists that's positive, then those guys will conform, or they'll kick them out of the locker room. And that's kind of the best way to kind of approach it.
Mm. Yes, sir.
Coach, tell us one of your best recruiting stories each.
I got one. All right, so it's 2000 and let's see, it was 2000, maybe 8 or 9. I was a off the field coach, the analyst, I guess. So we had some turnover when I was coaching at Alabama. So I got put on the road. So I'm fired up. Here I am. I'm a young guy that's been a high school coach, and I'm put on the road to recruit. And the guys I was in charge of was Trent Richardson, A.J. McCarron, and D.J. Fluker. So for like a week, I'm down there. You only get one visit, right? But I'm saving the visit, but I'm watching who's going in, and I want to have an idea probably to make sure somebody else is not in there. So I'm watching this house all week. It's A.J. McCarron's house. And, you know, the right truck, everything, there's not a whole lot of action in there. So I'm on the phone with Jim McElwain. I'm on the phone with Joe Pendry, Coach Saban, and I'm saying, you know, Tennessee's not been in here. LSU's not been in here. We're good, Coach. We're good. So on Thursday night, we're going to have a home visit, and we're going to bring them all in there. So I pick them up to the airport, and we roll out there to the house. I take them right to the house. I knock on the door, and this little old lady comes to the door, and I kind of look at her, and I said, "Is this not A.J. McCarron's house?" She said, "No, sir. A.J. lives 3 houses down." Luckily, he signed with us, and I got to keep a job.
Scouted the wrong house. That's
Wrong
good.
house.
That's a great story. You got anything that'll top that?
Nope. The funniest thing in recruiting, this isn't funny, the most challenging thing in recruiting in the home visits is always the food situation. So, you know, I always tell the assistant coaches, like, look, you got to give me some heads up, whether it's, you know, is there a meal, is there not a meal? Try not to have a meal, because that's going to make it last like 4 hours as opposed to like an hour. And so it's always the food discussion that becomes interesting. I flew to Miami a year ago, and went to, so it was one of our new coaches. So he didn't really kind of understand this policy that I kind of have our assistants do. So we fly in, and I'm starving. I mean, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I am absolutely starving. I haven't ate since the previous night. So we stop in South Florida. They got great Cuban food. So you know, stopped and had a Cuban cuisine. I was so happy. So the home visit is at like 5:30. Okay, so we get done eating, and we go to the home visit, and Alex Singfield from South Florida. You got the most wonderful family I've ever met in my life. I'm talking mom and dad are solid, and aunt and uncle are there, and grandma and grandpa on both sides are there. There's like 20 people there. and I smell food, and I'm like, oh no. and so I go into the kitchen, I go, oh man, what are y'all cooking? This is great. She goes, oh yeah, we're gonna hook you up, Coach. I go, nah, I'll make my plate right here. No, sir, you go sit down. I go, yes, ma'am. I go in there, I sit down, and I start sweating because I know what's about to happen. She puts a plate in front of me that is like piled up to here. I'm talking like, it's like a 20-course meal, and I'm stuffed. And you can't disrespect her, so I just start going to town on that thing. And I start sweating, and then I got to use the restroom. I'm like, I am in trouble.
Did you get the player?
We got him. We got him.
You got him. Yeah, it was worth it. Oh man, I don't think anything can top that. Anybody want to follow that?
I got one. Who would be the better coach, Dan? You as a basketball coach or Huggins as a football coach?
Thank God he's not up here. He wouldn't let anybody talk. We got great stories, don't we? I love basketball. I grew up playing basketball. I was, I was probably a better basketball player than a football player, but needless to say, I was 5'10", so who cared? It didn't matter. I tell you, we do have a great relationship, and Shane does our athletic director over here does a great job of cultivating the relationships with our entire coaches. We spent the last 3 days together just touring around the state of West Virginia, just promoting our athletic department, and raising money and all that. And so, needless to say, me and Hugs get into these conversations all the time. If you ask me, I could coach basketball. If you ask him, he could coach football. So, but we have a lot of fun with it.
I'd love to see the basketball teams play too. Both great programs. I know Coach Fulmer would appreciate us mentioning the great job that Rick Barnes and the men's team have done. We know about the women's basketball team's success through the years, but the men's team has had an incredible surge in recent years there. I'm sure you've quickly become a fan of that.
I can tell you real fast, I've been on them same tours with Rick here for the last 2 weeks, and it must be a basketball thing because he pretty much runs the show when he gets up here.
Yeah, he's got strong ties to this state too, as well. Anybody else? Well, just on behalf, Will, I'll let you come up and say a few words, but just on behalf of everyone, I think everybody deserves a round of applause for creating the kind of game that they're going to bring here to Charlotte.
Thank you, Ted. I didn't know this was going to be a comedy show, but we're glad it turned out that way. 2 great coaches, 2 great programs. It's going to be a great football game on September 1. We won't announce the kickoff time until next week, but it'll be around 3:30. Just in case you're interested, we think it'll be around 3:30. We're waiting for final announcement from the networks as to where it'll be and what we'll be doing. But if you think this was great, wait till September 1, and we're going to have a great football game. I want to thank the coaches. I want to thank Taylor for coming and emceeing this. In case you didn't get it, there is some dessert in the next room. I know that people didn't get quite enough to eat for our tailgate, and there's also a little silent auction if you're interested in any memorabilia or field passes or the like. I want to again thank everybody who's involved with putting this on. This has become a phenomenal event for us. I want to thank these coaches and athletic directors and staffs. We look forward to a great football game, and particularly want to thank these coaches because this has been phenomenal. Thank you.